I'm really excited about because it's discussing the state of the customer, a leader's perspective. And Chantel went and recruited some of the best in business to lead this conversation. So we are going to bring back out Miss Chantel George, Neera Desai, and Michelle Vincent.
Thank you. Wow. Standing room only. So this was needed, yes? A leadership event for us to connect with one another? Yes. Yep. Thank you so much for being here again. So this part of the program, we're going to ask two amazing C-suite executives that I'll bring on in a second about the state of the customer. So to preface this, it's been a really tough year this year, as we all know, in sales. But C-suite executives have the responsibility to figure out opportunities to drive the business forward. So these two amazing women are near and dear friends of mine, and as well are really incredible leaders, revenue leaders. And so with that being said, I'm going to moderate this panel, and I'd love to invite Michelle Vincent, Global CEO of MoFilm, to the stage. And Neera Desai, CRO of nZero. Thank you so much. So I just mentioned that it's been a tough year from the C-suite level, and in our pre-calls, we did talk about what that means as a revenue driver. And so I'm just gonna get into some tough questions because you gave me permission in our pre-calls that I could ask some provocative questions. And so
no press is here, right?
Okay, so as revenue leaders, I'd like to know, and you can introduce yourself by answering this question. I'd like to know, how are you keeping the ships afloat during these economic times? And so, Neera, if you want to answer that question, also introduce yourself and a bit of your background.
Yes. First of all, thank you so much for the opportunity. I love the previous panels. You're all so inspiring, and I'm hoping to learn something from you as well. So Neera Desai, engineer by education, 20 years in sales as well. I would say my sales skills must be a bit so-so because I've always sold winning brands. I don't know what it'd be like to sell an underdog brand. So somehow, as an engineer who's an introvert and quiet, ended up having a 20-year sales career. And now I have the pleasure of working for a climate tech company. So I wanted to do something different. After being at Slack, Salesforce, LinkedIn, IBM, how can I contribute and be seen as a business leader first? And then sort of the people leader, so I impacted that quite a bit. I've worked on that. To be known for my revenue results, to be known for business first, and then as a woman and a minority woman in a different capacity. So I'm working now as a chief revenue officer for a company called nZero. We're about 100 people. It's in climate technology. It's a nascent industry, so I get to exercise the muscle of what it was like being at Slack as well and seeing the different customer changes from IBM to now. So revenue is always on my mind. It's the top of my mind, not just because it's in my title. I'm always thinking, what have I done enough today? Like, is it for my teams? Are my teams set up for success? My two levers as revenue in this economic climate is, are the team most productive, and how am I maximizing, like revenue, ARR, bookings for the company? And given the macros right now, it seems that what I can do the most is encourage my team to show up most prepared and create value versus extract value for our customers. And then I just went through a couple of board meetings, really tough conversations, so we'll talk about that separately. But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Thank you. Michelle?
All right, love that. Tough act to follow. So my background started out in studying pre-medicine for college, and then somehow I came out in business, selling ads, and then ultimately managing my college newspaper, and I have been in sales ever since. Even in this role, I'm still selling, always be selling. And my journey has been largely in media. So went out into this financial crisis in early 2000s, post 9/11. I had an extra semester because of that college transition. Networked my way into Hearst magazines, and then went into inside sales at the New York Post, Smile and Dial, screamed at in my face. So got the hard knocks in sales, and then that's when Google came to my door in 2007. I stayed there for about 10 years, went in in the inside sales organization. It was called ISO back then. And went through a couple reorgs, got my first sales manager role there. I actually said in my interview process that that was my goal, and I realized that goal 5 years later. And navigated several different teams over 10 years. One of my directors that made me that manager pulled me over to Facebook for a hot minute. Cambridge Analytica happened. Wasn't sure how I felt about Zuck. Went back to Google. Ran auto teams because it was different. It was brand. It was trying to pull budgets over from TV. It was a different muscle. I was working on a lot of performance teams before. And then next thing I knew, through some networking and having had a taste of running product teams at Google for a little bit after a 6-month maternity leave cover, I got the role as CEO of MoFilm. And it was an opportunity I could not turn down. Not only was it being able to drive breadth in my experience of managing a P&L, but also getting into the creative space. So still adjacent to what we were doing at Google. We very publicly try to uplift diverse creators around the world. It's 14 full-time employees in my organization. We are small, we are scrappy, and then 10,000 creators around the world. We say if Coca-Cola gives us a call, we do everything we can 100% of the time to make sure we are surfacing creators that are women and people of color. And if it's a black woman, everybody, no matter how you look like, is popping that champagne. That's because that the creator space is really, really hard for that set. Really, really hard. And it is not a world where a lot of those opportunities just come to your door. But once it's cracked, we see these creators take off. And then during these tough times, to your point, Chantel, there's a people philosophy or a management philosophy that I've always led with, and it's people first, process second. So when times are tough, checking in with the team, figuring out how are you doing. I know things aren't easy. What do you need? We do these culture pulses. What do you need to just, be at your best so that we can all figure this out together? And then from a process standpoint, when you sit in this seat, there's no softening of quarterly goals to maybe offset the good one. I'm held to 2 goals. It is revenue and it is EBITDA. And I actually just had a one-on-one with the whole co-founder, and those were the 2 numbers he cares about. If I'm not hitting that at the end of the year, then it is what it is. And we go back to basics, and my target doesn't shift back and forth. So it is hard, but as long as the people are here and feeling good and we're in it together, I'm proud to say I've now been in the role for a little over a year. And outside of performance management, I have 100% retention of all of my strong performers. And yeah, we're hitting the streets. We're pounding the pavement, and I'm side by side later with her, selling and doing everything that we can.
That's amazing. Please, another round. So there's not a lot of C-suite business leaders that are women of color. So this was an exceptional treat, and I'm really thankful to have you 2 here. I'd like to talk about innovation, because I think the trend of today is we are innovative, we are strong, we are diverse. What are some innovative ways that you've been pushing your team recently?
I can take that. Yeah, I can take that. I think we all know that the environment is moving rapidly when it comes to technology, and we were really looking at the metaverse, I think, at one point. Now it's all about AI, and quite frankly, my approach is enrolling the team, looking at the space, and also looking at the stakeholders that we work with as well. My stakeholders are threefold as a company. We've got our customers, the brands that we're working with. We've got our creator community, the creators that we're bringing to the table to create all the different content, ads, etc. You name it. And then of course we have our shareholders and larger organization internally. And taking a pulse on what everybody cares about, what everybody's trying to understand. We do everything that we can to try to get ahead of the game and get ahead of the cutting edge and test and iterate. And I think I've learned that from the benefit of being at a lot of tech companies over the years. You just have to dive into the deep end of the pool, take some risks and play with it. So it was very early into the AI buzz that we had creatives bringing in some of the leaders from a lot of the rising AI creative companies. We just pulled out a camera, started putting podcasts on YouTube to enable our creators to not be afraid that the technology was going to take over their jobs. Yeah, I know. I grabbed a
I
water.
got so emotional by hearing you say that. That's a good thing. No, it's good.
Yeah, so yeah, that's been our approach.
That's excellent. I love that taking the innovative, what is happening in the industry with AI and leveraging that to your advantage. I think all of us, no matter which industry, space, vertical, thank you so much, are in, just trying to create an edge for our team to win in the market and to make them feel that they're supported. So as I mentioned, this was a big pivot from an enterprise SaaS 20-year career to standing up climate tech company, which is a nascent industry. For some, if you had followed along in our belief in sustainability, there was a 2009-2013 crash, the first clean tech 1.0. This is clean tech 2.0. So the team, what they're doing is basically what I think innovative is being product managers. So we're sellers, but we're being product managers in the sense that we are more interested in the customer versus show up point, more interesting around like selling our products. So most of our sales calls and our approach has been just treating the human and asking them what are they doing, how did they get the job in sustainability. Most were either in a finance org, were then put into this place, or some created a corporate sustainability role without a team. So they're in a team on their own, having to manage these large enterprise brands and drive whatever those initiatives are forward. So like we have a ton of empathy, so we show up as product managers, understand how do you define sustainability at your company, what are you doing there? And then to automate some of our administrative process, we also use AI. So like, please follow up within 24 hours with a thank you note. Again, seek to create value. So send pre-read, like send a deck prior to, if we're gonna be talking about presentation, send agenda version 1 and ask for feedback prior to the meeting, so it's maximizing everyone's time. Like little things like that are follow through has actually been more innovative because we're getting more meetings this way. Customers feel seen and heard, and it's not taxing on them to get to work with us, just to even have a conversation. And just one quick tangent on this, you give me the mic and I'll keep talking. I started off, as I mentioned, in IBM, and I just remember that buyer journey. It was so difficult, like the process and what it took for a customer to even evaluate our technology. It would take 7 to 8 months, right? Like you needed a solution engineer, you would need, like the seller held all the cards. And now with freemium and AI, you know, it's buyer-centric sale right now. So the buyer holds all the cards. So like, how do we show up more innovative to be, again, make it all about them, and develop a POV. So that's what's been innovative for us. We show up with a one-pager POV, which is a point of view, and we just align around before a meeting. What are the 3 things I must say? What are the 3 things we should know about this customer? And then how do we make sure that we end up leaving with a good experience? And that's it.
I'm hearing a lot of trends. I'm hearing, well, first of all, you two are on the forefront of emerging business trends in general. So sustainability and climate technology is emerging. It's fast and furious. It's a hot industry. And the creator industry is another hot industry. These are industries to look into. I also hear the trend of you two are in the trenches. You're not afraid to be in the trenches. Both of you are managing a lot and also are in small and fast growing companies, which is excellent. And I think almost brings you back, I'm sure, to like early days when it's kind of, is it nostalgic to be this close to the business and to be this close with your team? Do you feel like you're redoing part of your sales career again?
It does, but I also feel like this is, one, yes, dusting off the AE gloves to see, like, do I really know how to build a good deck or craft a good story? Do I have the narrative right? But most of it is, I think, it's what's required from a business leader now is to lead from the front, to actually understand at task level, at process level, at systems level, what does your team and the talent needs are. Because if you're just managing from the top, I think those days I feel like are gone, even with orgs of 200 people, orgs of 80 that I had at Salesforce. I think if it's all about you are a number to me and you are in a spreadsheet as a number to me, like I don't think you're gonna get that sort of empathy, loyalty, and that is what's going to also show up in from a customer. So yes, it's been rewarding, and I do think it's such a rewarding time to be in a sales career, no matter what level you're in, because you get to interact with some amazing technology, like Gong or any type of recorded call. I wish I had that 20 years ago, because then I would get some coaching around linear structured communication or how I showed up. It's also rewarding to sell in the way the buyer wants to buy. I think that's what's really rewarding, and then also to get to learn something new. Sellers always have a beginner's mindset. We always are naturally curious, hungry to learn. Even in a new industry, I think we can maintain that DNA about who we are and then get energy from it.
And I'd love to build on that because Britton earlier mentioned HBR, which I highly recommend. There's free articles, and if you want the subscription, there's a lot of valuable insights within. Bring your A game, and just in terms of thinking about strategically about your own org and value you can bring to the organization. But there was one article in particular that I remember reading as I'm pinching myself for this role. I kind of looked into it because I was curious, and I had this suspicion about why me versus other players. And sales backgrounds are actually becoming increasingly more valuable when it comes to those next CEO positions. It used to be the CFO, it used to be the COO,
That's right.
because operations and finance were sort of determined to be the skill set required to run a company. And now more businesses, more boards are becoming smart to the fact that if a business is going to grow and you need to drive revenue and profit, you need to also be able to have leadership that can sell and lead by example. And so I am the CEO, I'm an account manager, I'm an account executive, and I have to, one of the, again, no press in the room, I'm in the process of building out an inside sales organization so we can do outbound to drive more volume at scale. And I'm the one that's got to build it, so I'm thinking through, all right, well, we got to get the presentation down in a different way. We got to get scripting down, and then how do I channel my inner Stuart who used to walk the inside sales floor when I was at the New York Post? I got to be out there with them, smiling and dialing, showing how when I pitch, they can see how the customer is reacting. I know, and even just doing some background referrals for my newest hire, one of his managers was saying that the seller that we're bringing on board is really good at mirroring. Well, that's perfect, right? Again, I need to be able to lead by example. So always selling in any role, even that product role I mentioned earlier, you're selling internally. It's a skill set that will drive value everywhere.
Two quick questions of terminology. Linear communication, would you define that? And then mirroring.
You know, that was actually, speaking of feedback, that somebody had given that to me 15 years ago. They were like, you come across too casual in front of a C-suite. Or, and very next peer then said, I think you speak too much in a meeting. So I was trying to reconcile, like, am I speaking too much in a meeting, or am I not speaking enough and being quiet, right? Like, whose feedback to take and when to take it. I think what you just shared was super astute earlier, and it's something that we all experience. So one of the feedback is like, okay, you have executive presence, and again, this even showed up right before the board meeting 2 weeks ago. You have executive presence, but respond in a linear structured way, which means, to me, it's like, am I saying 1, 2, 3 as a way back, or am I doing more data-driven responses? So I think it depends on the audience. If I'm in a phone call with a colleague catching up, I am not going to be using linear structured communication. They'll see through that. That's not me. But basically the definition is state your purpose or intent. Like to lead with the end in mind, net thesis or the conclusion. It's ask, justification, and then provide details. So if you remember the framework, ask whatever that is that you want, the top line, and then provide some 2 to 3 bullets, data-driven bullets, or what the justification is, and then the details behind supporting facts.
I love that.
Anything else you'd add to that too?
No, I think
That's
you
it.
landed it
Okay.
perfectly. Yeah, you did.
Okay,
And then to the point of mirroring,
Yeah.
I would say that it's actually something that has also served me through the years. In going back to the earlier panel, especially in those times where I was the only or one of two, But there's a way to do it where you can still mirror authentically, and that is kind of taking those pieces of what you see working well. How are people showing up? What are some of the actions that people are taking or activities that others are doing that are driving success in the organization? My peers that are getting promoted, is there something that they're doing? When I see them pitch, is there a way that they're stating something where all of a sudden their stakeholders are leaning in? And it's a great skill set to have, but you don't have to mirror without losing your authentic self and losing your flavor. I think that's really important. But it's something that, again, when you're sitting across from, let's say, a CMO, a CFO, a CEO, picking up on signals of their behavior and making sure if they are responding to you in short, sweet sentences, that they might not have the patience or mindset to receive and monologue. So it's a skill set that I value in the sellers on my team, and it's one that I've seen taking little pieces of what works to help me become successful in my career.
A high amount of emotional intelligence required to close business at the levels that you're closing business at, and also to interact with your team, the way you're interacting with your team. This is not on my list of questions, but how did you develop this level of emotional intelligence?
I feel like it's always learning. One is making sure you're tuning into your own intuition, but most of it has been just failing. Like, I've bombed meetings, and I'm like, wow, the customer left mystified, I left mystified. I think most of it is just practice, and it depends, right? Like certain roles, it's like 2 quarters and you're up and out. I think Jessica talked about the culture, so I ended up working at a different culture now because I am nurtured, I am seen at a company, I am valued, and it's not vertical thinking, meaning that it's not just agreeing and saying yes to everything that the C-suite wants you to say yes to. But for me, it's been just practicing and learning and seeing, did my language and the way I showed up, that energy, did it land, and did I achieve the objective, right? What was the goal of the conversation, the meeting? But most of it has been just failing and learning and getting better. And then again, from peers as well. Watching what works for somebody might not always work for me. Like somebody can time a joke so well and ease, that is not me. Or talk about sports. Like golfing or football, that I've never sold through going on a golf course. So anyhow, what works for somebody might not work for you. And I think, just practice obviously. So I do a ton of dry runs as well with the team, and then I ask them, give me 2 pieces of feedback where I did well, and 2 I need to improve on. And that's been a tactical thing that works. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. Anything for you, Michelle?
I love where you started with learning by failure, and that was actually, I was a little tongue-in-cheek about Facebook before it was Meta, but I did have a VP while I was working there that really believed in that, and when I introduced myself to the team, he wanted to me to open with things that are awesome and amazing that I do, but also any failures that I've learned from it. It's a big theme in the organization, and with that, I think one of the things that has served me well, and I've tried to encourage it in my mentees too, is that receiving feedback. Or taking challenging situations and not letting that knock your confidence is so important. It is so easy to feel like, all right, I failed, maybe this job isn't for me, maybe this organization isn't for me, and if you can flip the script and use it to fuel energy into, I'm gonna prove that person wrong, I do this really well, or I'm gonna prove myself wrong in that I can't actually do this thing that I failed at, and take that and learn from it and identify the cues and the little systems or signals that maybe I missed. I think I have a masochistic desire to always hear that constructive feedback because I know it can make me better and more in tune with what I need to understand to succeed.
I feel like that's kind of a secret that a lot of fast-growing companies have, right? Where they're building quickly and they're having radical feedback and they're having war rooms and they're like, let's dissect this right now. What's wrong?
That's right.
Let's rebuild it. Let's try it again. So it sounds like that's what you two are saying. You're not afraid to take that mentality and that mindset to your teams and have that transparent connection. Sometimes I feel like maybe as we advance in our careers, we lose that a little bit. We're afraid of being vulnerable. We're afraid because you've gotten so far. We don't want anyone to question us. We don't want anyone to we don't want the relationship dynamic to change, right? How do you keep that relationship dynamic in check with your teams? Because you do want their feedback, but there's still a dynamic that has to be respected.
That's right. I mean, it depends on what the decision and what the situation is. So most things are situational for me. And I think that dynamic comes in where, again, is this a big presentation? We need to win this customer because this is one of the first 50 customers that we're doing. So I'm going to ultimately make the call. Certain situations require consensus. Our policies, our comp plans, things that we're working on. This is amazing to actually get to justify what territories and how to roll that out versus before it was just top down. So those decisions, I want to get weigh in and input on it. But what I'm looking for, depending on the situation that is what is the thinking pattern of the org? What are the action patterns we can align on where it does make sense for our business? And can I seek different perspectives where I don't diminish like their voice and what they want to articulate to me and share pulse on the field or our customer's viewpoint or what product is pushing back, whatever that is. But I think it's giving people the forum, but then ultimately being a leader where based on our current requirements, this is ultimately my call, or this is a CEO call that we have to follow.
Any thoughts? Because you mentioned a lot of that radical feedback. So it sounds like what Neera, you're saying is that there's a time and place for that. Not all the time are we going to have this dialogue about my choices.
Exactly, and radical with also radical can make one sense, but you have to have empathy as well. Like you can't give somebody who's just like in a car accident the very next day feedback on 10 things that they need to work on. Maybe 2 pieces of feedback is max, but you're right, it's knowing when to give it, and again, it's having pulse on the field and having pulse on the right dynamic.
Yeah, and I think going back to your point around EQ, you definitely have the read the room moments. I think there are times where maybe you may have individuals that don't want to receive feedback ever, and sometimes even if they're not ready to receive it, part of the feedback is it's an important part of growth and development. But to the degree that I think expectations are set and it becomes a part of the culture, then the next piece to understand is the psychological safety in the room. In your organization, in your team, peer to peer. I've seen the intent with providing feedback go terribly wrong when that foundational psychological safety isn't in place. And when it's broken, it's really important to raise that, whether it's to your manager or having meaningful, honest conversations with peers to figure out how to turn that around. Without that, everybody is going to remain stagnant, and it can create some dynamics that I've seen that really prevent a team or a company from reaching its full potential.
Thank you for that. I have a couple more questions, and then I'd like to open it up, so start thinking about your questions. I would like to understand what your vision is for the future and your forecasting, and I know this is kind of a lot, but the trend has been the state of the customer and how we're going to take care of the customer. You've spoken about the customer is very knowledgeable right now. They have everything at their fingertips. They know everything before they get on the phone with you. They're super smart. They have the AI. That's great. So when you think about the next few years, how do you see yourself winning? What's the strategy? What's the winning strategy? Knowing everything happening in the economy, knowing how the customer is super smart, and that's a good thing. How are we going to win?
I think it's going to be iterative, but to me, it's actually being comfortable knowing that the customers, who are going to be probably raving fans of your product, will always know more than the seller will or you will. Even as a CRO, I feel like my customer knows more about my product, whether it's administration, security, governance, whatever the functionality is. It's because they are so knowledgeable, and we should celebrate that and actually leverage that. I want raving fans of our product and our platform, because that helps me understand their business requirements and potentially take that feedback to product where appropriate to shape the future. I think it's meeting the customer where they are is ultimately what I think the winning strategy will be. And they also have a ton on their mind, right? Like they're dealing with top 10 priorities that has sustainability, AI, their businesses are being disrupted, they're worried about our competitors, they're worried about their growth, like balancing profitability versus actual growth. all of that is showing up in front of you, and all you're trying to do is close a deal or have a conversation. So I think winning is, again, meeting where the customer's at and celebrating if they're big fans of the product.
So basically, not trying to outsmart them per se,
No.
but celebrate them. I'm so happy you're so knowledgeable about this. I'm so happy you're so knowledgeable about the space.
That's
You
right.
know, how can we actually do an information share between each other and solve a problem?
That's exactly it. Like, imagine somebody who knows more about how do you administer, and I was at Slack. You know, there's over 1,000 integrations or workflows that go in. There's no way you would be better, or like as a seller would know that, but a customer's knowledgeable on that governance and administration because they're in it every day.
Right. Love that. Thank you,
Yeah.
Michelle.
The future will, and driving future success will be a combination of techniques that are a little bit old school and new, right? On the old school front, I would say it's always going to be important to understand what is the customer's problem and what am I trying to sell that will help them solve it. I almost love seeing a customer have a challenge in the news because that's my opportunity to figure out how I can help them. And so, yes, to your point, listening to the customer will always prevail. And then the new piece is making sure, again, to the first question or earlier question, is staying ahead of innovation and the evolving trends. I had the benefit of talking to Jonathan Mildenhall. He was running marketing for Coca-Cola when MoFilm first launched back in 2007, and he was their first client. And he now sits on the board of many amazing brands, Peloton, and some others. And I called him. I met him in Cannes where we connected, and I called him, set up a meeting right after that connection, and said, "Okay, Jonathan, you knew the original MoFilm. Why did you buy from us then? And what has changed? What has evolved that would make some of the boards that you sit on, some of those nice companies, buy from us today or tomorrow?" And he gave me a lot of great insight, but one thing included, he said, "All right, Michelle, every CMO back then wanted some of the things that your brand offered as a line item on their resume." He said, "Think about what the CMOs want as the line item on their resume today. It's AI, number one, and there's several other things." So staying ahead of, what are the emerging trends? What is going to get your end stakeholders celebrated, popping the champagne at the end of the year? That's what we have to stay ahead of in order to win in the future.
Right, so how do you help them make the right decision that will eventually help them grow with their company and get to the next stage? That's an excellent point. That was an amazing conversation. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We can do one or two questions? Yes, please.
Inspiring. I think my head's gonna blow up by the end. So I work for a London-based data intelligence and analytics company, right? We are in the petchem, oil, energy, and sustainability space. And everything that you're saying, so when it's tough times, whether it's good times or tough times, we get a lot of pull for our data because they have to make decisions, multi-million and billion-dollar decisions. How are y'all using data? And what other insights do you draw from as a differentiator in that customer experience and helping connect your solutions to their problems?
That's right. If
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
I don't know if I am, but you're welcome to chime in, please. I think most companies right now are worried about data management, data governance, and it's, do we have enough controls and reliability? And they view not having access to data risk, right? This is actual business risk that, shareholders, board, everybody is thinking about. So I think the way I approach it, it's more data transparency is needed. Can we share some of the data depending, at least from the climate standpoint? A lot of companies are putting goals out there. We want to be carbon neutral, we want to be this by 2030. Well, how are you going to do that? And it first starts with having access to the data, shared data, and then having controls and reliability. I know in the US, I know you mentioned London though, the US we're gonna have SEC climate rule come out, hoping by October. This has been delayed quite a bit, but this will give companies 3 elements. One element would be their carbon accounting. what your accounting standard should be, so everybody has the same baseline of knowledge on reporting. Second is the inventory of what type of data you should be collecting. And then third is anyone that has a material impact into the climate, you have to report that in a financial statement. That is more than 1%, and that also includes physical risk. So even though your company or product might not directly impact or indirectly impact, if you're physically located in an area that is going to be impacted by the climate, you have to disclose that. So anyhow, I think about as climate risk as financial risk, and data having controls and visibility and is huge for all of us. And I'm happy to talk to you more about that.
We are going to talk.
Yes.
Hi, good morning. My name is Donna Burke, and I work with the largest audio entertainment company in the U.S., SiriusXM. My question is probably more towards Michelle, and it has to do more with for your sellers, your outside sellers. We're in such a hybrid environment right now, and I've been in sales for over 30 years and have been very successful. My success comes when I'm having that face-to-face meeting with our clients. When you're on a Zoom call or a Teams call, we all see it, we just see their name. We don't see their faces. So what do you do in terms of, any tricks of the trades to get those clients to actually be engaged and a part of it, part of the conversation, and not necessarily them there with their name on the actual screen and then probably doing something else?
Yeah, I love that question because it was actually a part of an answer to an earlier question that I couldn't follow through due to time. But the inside sales organization that I mentioned earlier, I see that challenge. When I was hitting the phone at the New York Post, I was hitting the phone. People were still picking up phones at their desks.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist anymore. I actually got a cold call on my cell phone and I was like, oh, block. The world has changed in that respect, and it is challenging. We have to do ruthless prioritization. It's one of the reasons why we are really focused and bullish on the inside sales piece is that it becomes a volume game. It becomes a volume game, and there are some tools and technology out there to help make your hit rate a little bit higher, make sure you're talking to the right stakeholders. Then combined with go-to-market strategies, which I'm very grateful for that time I spent working on product and figuring out what are the different levers that we can pull to make sure that our own B2B customer journey has these different touch points where we remain top of mind. Sure, maybe they didn't respond to that initial email, but then we need to, try to get on the Zoom and engage in other ways. And when the Zoom is over and they haven't called back, how do we make sure that we're still in front of them in other ways that aren't invasive as well? And I think that's really key. Then for the outside piece, like I mentioned earlier, it's a ruthless prioritization. We're a small shop, we're a scrappy shop. We have a lot of overhead because of the freelancers that we activate to run creative in different markets. So we go through a regular process with the sales team and looking at, okay, what are the industries that are our priorities? What are the key stakeholders? Let's look at the sales pipeline and pipeline progression. Are we seeing any trends where we can map that back to, we know these CMOs are going to be at this particular event and we want to make sure that we're targeting them. So we're constantly iterating. I don't think that there's a perfect silver bullet, but spending time looking at the many ways that we can get sellers into all of those touch points, a combination of inside and out is key.
Yeah, I say multifaceted. Sorry.
Okay.
But these two panelists will be here. I want to get you guys out of here to do a break, and then we'll be back to do breakout workshops with Hannah Ajakawa from Revenue Funnel. So please take a 30. And for this networking session, I would like you to actually use this with intention. What can you give someone? So when you meet someone, what can you give them? What can you offer them? What can you do to change their lives? What can you just provide freely and willingly together? For right now, when we come back, we'll do the workshop and then we'll have lunch and we'll do feedback on the workshop. So hopefully that gives you more information as to what to expect. So thank you so much. Take a 30. We'll see you soon.